you've owned your home for the last 10 or 15 years, you have built some serious equity in your property. However, if you've bought in the last few years or worse, are still trying to get into the market, you know that housing in some cities in Canada can feel like a rigged game. And that is the reason that this election matters more than ever. Because what happens next under a liberal or a conservative government, it could define the future of housing for your kids, your grandkids, and for yourself. In this video, I'm going to break down the promises, the numbers, and the realities that could either ease this crisis or possibly make it worse. So you are probably one of these three types of people. The first one is those who have owned for a long time and have seen increased values and a lot of equity growth. Now, the second group are those of you that are new to the market. In the past 5 to 7 years, you've possibly bought a home, maybe had a little bit of a higher value, but you might have also seen a lot of equity growth as well. And the third one is those that basically want to buy property, but they can't yet and are just planning on doing it in the future. Now, regardless of what you are, what category you are of these three, you are probably one of the 88% of Canadians who are concerned with the state of housing in Canada today. Now, my name is Jared, if we haven't met before, and I run a real estate team here in Calgary, Alberta. And before the keyboard warriors go off in the comments, I am not taking a realtor approach. I'm not looking for who is going to give me the most sales, who's going to make me the most money. That's not who we are. And I want to help you understand what these different parties are saying and kind of get at insights that you might not be seeing elsewhere. But before we dive into the policies and the promises that these parties are making, there are actually two main factors that we need to understand before diving into that. The first one is the supply of housing, and secondly is the demand for housing. All the videos that I've watched online and the content that I'm reading are only talking about the supply. They're not talking about the demand side, and you cannot have one without the other. Now, I don't know about you, but in Calgary, where I'm located, we've seen a huge growth in our population, and I'm sure where you are located, you have seen it too. And you've felt that increase of demand. You felt the traffic get fuller, right? Roads are busier, more people at grocery stores, things like that. And this is putting pressure on your local housing market as it is on mine, and how the supply of housing is being impacted as well. Now, I gotta say, over the last 10 years, we have seen housing become really unaffordable for many people in larger cities in Canada, and a large topic of discussion right now. Now, only 6% of the responses in this study said that homes were affordable. Yikes. That's 94% of people saying that some version of homes are not affordable. So this is a hot topic and something that needs to get figured out in our country. So let's talk about demand for housing first before we jump into the supply. So as you can easily see on this chart, the amount of people that have been allowed to come into our country has exploded over the last 10 years, specifically the non-permanent residents, which is in orange in that chart. Now, this group of people that have moved here, they're not buying properties, they're renting. These are renters. They can't purchase a home based on the current government rules, and they must rent. So then there is these permanent residents, and that's in blue, and that has stayed at an all-time highs and is really, really stable right now, meaning there's a steady flow of permanent resident people coming in. And this isn't going down, and it's stable around that 400,000 range in this chart. And if you look at the chart, you can see very clearly when the non-permanent status, the orange, started coming. There was a little bit back in like 2011 to 2014, tiny bit there, but 2016 is when you can start seeing that orange opening up. Obviously over COVID, those 2-3 years, it dropped dramatically. It just exploded after 2022. And that to me is a really, really, really big red flag. Later in the video, I'm gonna circle back to this. So remember all of this orange, because we want to talk about supply, but just rentals, not just like new homes being built. So remember this chart, we'll come back to it. Now, here's the good thing. Both parties, liberal and conservative, are saying that they're looking at reducing this number each year. This is a good thing, right? Not just the non-permanent, but the permanent resident status. Like, we need that to drop because we have so many people, right? So if you have too many people who are interested in buying something, that price is going to go up if there's not enough of it. And that is just supply and demand. So where there is more demand and the supply isn't keeping up, I don't care what you say, prices are going to rise. And if in the future we do not lower the demand and increase the supply at the same time, prices are going to stay where they're at or they're going to go up. I know that many of you are going to say, yeah, but they're not. Well, you're correct. Right now, they're not. But give it 3, 4, 5 years down the road, it's going to continue to increase like crazy if we do not tackle this issue. So let's talk about the Liberals first. So the Liberals are saying they're going to ease the lowering, and these are their targets over the coming years. So in 2025, they have a target of 395,000 people. And again, these are permanent residents, people who can buy properties when they move here. 2026, they're going to lower it to 380. 2027, they're going to lower it to 365. And so we're still sitting close to 400,000 people. That's not really lowering the number of people coming in. To me, when I look at those numbers, that's barely changing what has been done. By the end of 2027, that's about 1.1 to 1.2 million more permanent residents that will come into our country. Now, the Conservatives, they have said they're going to drop this to 200 to 250,000 per year, like kind of that range. They haven't given a solid number, but that's the range that they're saying they're going to drop it to. So at the end of 2027, same time frame, 3 years out, if it's 250,000 people per year, that's about 750,000 on the high end, more permanent residents. That's nearly 400,000 less people than the Liberals. Essentially, like the whole city of London, Ontario, or like if you're in Alberta, Red Deer, Medicine Hat, and Lethbridge combined, but we're still 150,000 people short. So that is a lot of people less that would come in if the Conservative government does what they say they would do. Now, we still have a large amount of people who have come into our country, right? Now, since 2020, there are still about 2.4 million people, from my calculations, who have come into Canada who are permanent residents. Many would have rented, and to start, right? So usually when people come to a new country, they rent for the first year or two, build up that credit, and then they want to purchase. So many of these people would have rented and maybe already bought something or tried to buy something, and they're in that second or third category of the 3 different types of people, or they're planning on purchasing in the coming years. So this is demand, right? This is competition, this extra people who are wanting to buy the same homes of those who are already residents of Canada. So hopefully that kind of gives you a good picture of what the demand side looks like, right? The Liberals and the Conservatives are both saying they're going to decrease, but there's definitely one that is saying they're going to decrease that demand a lot more than the other, which we need to do in our country. Now let's talk about supply of housing. So a lot of what both parties are talking about is new supply to our market, because we already have our existing homes. Those are being transacted, and there's purchases, there's sales, all that kind of stuff. But if we have a ton of new people coming into our country and we don't have the supply to keep up, that's going to be a problem. And this is where both of their platforms are really kind of digging into talking about how can we add more supply to our market. Now, we have to look at what has happened before we talk about what they say should happen, okay? So I'm gonna throw up a lot of numbers on the screen here, but since 2015 to 2019, there was about 1.033 million new homes built in our country, our whole country, not a province, not a city, just our whole country, okay? And from 2020 to 2024, there was about 1.2 million. And you can see on the screen all of each year broken out of how many units were built. Now, if you take all of these numbers and you figure out the average number of homes that have been built in our country are about 223,000 homes each year. Now, how many permanent residents were moving into our country? Well, that was like 390, 400,000 on average the last 4 years. Like, the numbers aren't just adding up really good. We have not been keeping up with how many homes are being built. And this is what has happened under the current government that we have. I mean, you could argue that these numbers, that with 2.4 million people that came in over the last 5 years, and we had 1.2 million homes built, that would be enough, right? 2 people per household, and basically there's enough homes. But it isn't. I mean, there's no way that you can say that we're building enough homes for the people that are coming into our country. Now, we have to also think about people who haven't bought a home in our country and they want to now, and they may have been born in Canada, right? They've been renting for the last 10 years and they're like, okay, I finally saved up and now I want to purchase. We don't even have that number in here as well. So if you have that much demand for the supply that's being created in our country, let alone the supply that's already in our cities, it's just not working. And a lot of the types of homes, if you start looking at major cities like Toronto, Vancouver, not so much Calgary, but if you look at Toronto and Vancouver, the major cities, the types of homes that are being built, it's not what families are looking for. Like, I saw a great article where it was talking about, I don't know, must have been about 2 decades ago. The average size of a downtown condo in Toronto was about 1,000 square feet. And if you look over the last 5 years or so, it's closer to like 600 square feet. Like, the types of homes that are being built, they're just not adequate. They're not the right types of homes that people are wanting to purchase. And so it's created this weird market where there's a demand for homes for families, but the types of homes that are being built aren't for families. That doesn't work. And if you look at over the same time frame, over the last 11 years, we saw the median home prices in Canada go from $413,000 in 2015 up to $713,000 in 2025. Now that's the median. That's including all the small towns in Saskatchewan and Manitoba and Alberta. That's including the major cities where there was like crazy numbers that went up. I know for us in Calgary, over the last 5 years, if you owned a detached home over the last, maybe not even 5 years, less than that, you would have seen about $250,000 of equity growth just in the last, let's really like call it 3-4 years.
Well, Mr. Carney, the reality is that housing costs doubled under the Liberal government, while Justin Trudeau made exactly the same promises that you are now repeating today. He promised that he would double home building. In fact, home building went down. He promised that he'd reduce the cost. In fact, it went up, and here we are.
Okay, so let's talk about the policies and what they are saying in what is going to happen in the future and what they're proposing. All right, let's start with the Liberals. So the Liberals, the first thing they're going to talk about is no GST for first-time buyers only on new or majorly renovated homes up to $1 million in value. Second thing is they're saying they're going to double the pace of new homes being built up to 500,000 annually, with a goal of building 3.9 million homes in 5 to 6 years. 500,000, 5 years, 3.9, that doesn't isn't mathing for me. But bringing back incentives to spur on rental construction. That's another thing they're running on. So they want to bring back more incentives to spur on rental construction. Now, if you recall, all of the renters that moved here that are now leaving our country, I'm going to show you a chart here shortly that kind of shows you we don't need more rentals. I'm going to circle back to the GST comment because conservatives are talking about that as well. And I want to focus on their 500,000 new homes annually.
We're getting government back in the business of building affordable homes.
Back into the business of housing in this country. Back into the housing business.
Double the pace of housing construction.
Our government wants to see housing construction double. Double. The new housing starts in this country over the next 10 years. We're currently on a path to double construction of new housing over the next decade.
We're going to double down on what's already working.
Now, what gets me is this 500,000 home building plan. It's something that I've heard before, but it hasn't happened. And if you recall, there's only been about 230 or 225,000 new homes each year being built, and that's at capacity. We don't even have enough trades for that. So both parties are saying they're gonna, spur on trades, which is great, and they're gonna get more people in the trades, which we need. So it seems to me that we already have a shortage of trades to build more homes. Now, how are we going to increase this? Both the Liberals and Conservatives has said that they will do grants for more labor. Housing is about to get a lot more expensive in the next decade. if this isn't sorted out. So the Liberals are saying that we can just trust them to more than double our output of new homes in our country, starting right away, in the middle of a labor shortage in Canada's construction industry. To me, this is very ambitious. It's very hopeful, but I'll let you be the judge if it's going to be doable. So the Liberals also said they want to bring more incentives for rental builds. Okay, so I want to quickly share some insights on rental construction, as you may have never even seen this chart before or even heard about this. So you see the orange line? I don't think we need to spur on more purpose-built rentals in our country. That is the increase in rentals that we've already seen that are purposely built for rental purposes, right? Remember the 1.7 million non-permanent residents that came to Canada who couldn't buy homes? What are rental rates doing right now? They're like dropping. What are non-permanent resident people doing right now? They're leaving. Demand for rentals, for what I can tell across our country, is decreasing. We don't need to spur on more rental construction. We already have enough. Actually, there's enough in the pipeline that there's gonna be more purpose-built rentals coming to the market in the coming year or two, that we just don't need more. So I don't think this is a very smart policy, something that I think we should be voting for. Now let's talk about the Conservatives. They said they're also going to eliminate the GST on all new homes up to 1.3 million people. And this is not limited to first-time buyers like the Liberals. Now, they also said they're going to sell 15% of the federal buildings or land for housing development. So there's more land that we can develop on. And they're also planning on withholding funding to cities who don't meet the 15% growth in housing built each year. Now, a part of the GST and this like 1.3 million, they've also recently talked about how they're going to reduce up to $100,000 in cost of new builds. And this is going to be in conjunction with the local cities' taxes, the provincial taxes, and encouraging them to also reduce it. There's nothing that I've seen that anyone says that they're going to do it, but that's what they're saying. So with the Conservatives, let's look at this 15% growth in housing built each year. So if they want to reach the targets of having 500,000 homes, also like the Liberals, but it's going to take them up to 2030 to get there. So a 15% target would look something like this. So in 2024, we would see an increase of about up to 245,000 new homes being built. We'd go up to 281 in 2025. It'd go up to 324,000 in 26, 372 in 27, 428 in 28, 493,000 homes in 2029, and finally 566,000 homes in 2030. Now, what I appreciate about this plan is that there's a realistic map, right? There's actually saying, let's grow, because we cannot just say, boom, here's an extra 260 something thousand new homes on our market that are just going to start getting built. It's just not going to happen. I mean, that's just not a reality. And you might say, well, it doesn't matter. They're going to, eventually get there and try to grow their way there, which is great. But to me, just saying that they're going to say 500,000 homes, that's our goal, we're going for it. Well, that's great. But give us a roadmap that is clear, because there's just not enough trades and there's such a shortage of people to help build these properties, right? Now let's talk about GST. Now, both parties have a version of removing the GST on new homes. The Liberals propose eliminating the 5% GST only for first-time buyers on homes up to $1 million, funded by reallocating resources from existing federal housing programs, which are unknown. And the Conservatives plan to remove GST for all buyers on homes up to $1.3 million, funded by cutting $8 billion from existing federal housing programs brought in by the Liberals. So this might sound exciting, right? All of a sudden you could save all the GST on a new build or a majorly renovated property, right? Which is great. But how is this going to impact local markets? So let's play a scenario here of a new home that is $850,000, right? Because not every home is the $1 million plus, and even then, not every new home is $850. But just for argument's sake, let's play and just use a number of $850,000. 5% of that the GST is $42,500. So that means this new price for this brand new home that's on the market is going to be $807,500. So if we run the calculations of how much would this save you for your mortgage, if you had 10% down, 25 amortization, and roughly like a 4% interest rate on $850,000, your mortgage monthly payment would be just over $4,000 at $4,024. If you had a mortgage at $807,500, your monthly payment would be $3,822. Now, if you already currently own a home, this is great because now your own home that you have kind of frees you up to get it back into the market, right? So if you have a larger home and you're downsizing, this is great. However, it doesn't work because you might not be a first-time buyer. So if the Liberals are in, you actually don't save the GST because you're not a first-time buyer. If the Conservatives are in, you get to do that. Now, there's a downside on the Conservative side. This could spur on way more investments, right? Of like investors coming and buying tons of new properties. Like I know some investors that have come to Calgary that we've talked to and heard from, they've bought 10, 15 detached properties. And I'm like, that's wild. Like it's really screwing with our market out here. And we haven't seen that in Calgary as much as other cities have. And we're just getting a taste of it because of what has happened the last number of years. But at the end of the day, both of these aren't the best. These GST policies are just not the best. So back to the scenario. How is this going to impact the local homeowner in that same neighborhood or maybe neighborhoods that are close to it of this new property, right? Well, in Calgary at least, if a new home is on the MLS system, you have to have that 5% wrapped into the price, including in the price of the sale price that you are posting, right? So it's not like the 5% is just going to be hidden on the side. No. The price will actually have to drop because it's showing that 5% decrease, right? So it's going to take a direct hit to the homeowner that is beside them. So in this scenario, let's pretend that there is a home that's listed around $799,000 compared to the new $850,000 property. That resale home, when the new home all of a sudden has a drop of 5% and they're down to like $807,000, $808,000, now, I mean, they're only like $7,000 apart in their asking prices. That resale home is probably going to have to push its price down to like $760,000, $755,000 in order to be competitive against the new homes. So this is instantly decreasing value in maybe not all areas, but many areas, specifically in Calgary, I can think of, that are close to new builds. Now, regardless of who you vote for, this probably could happen. And I don't think this is a great plan. Now, however you look at this scenario, you have to always remember we can't just look at supply. We need to look at demand as well. These two are in conjunction with each other. And whichever party is able to ease extra demand on top of what we already are seeing and already have based on people coming into our country, and they're able to basically increase the supply in a way that isn't necessarily hurting everybody, I think that would have the best outcome. So now let's circle back to the three different types of people, right? Of you that are watching this. So you might be in that first category where you've owned for a long time and you've seen a lot of equity. You might be in the second category where you bought something recently and have seen some equity growth, or maybe you bought at the top in those big cities and now have seen lost equity because prices have dropped. Or you might be in the third category where you haven't bought yet and you're trying to figure that out. Or this third category could be your kids in 10 years trying to buy something. We need to look at each of these three separately. You over here in the first category, you have made equity and potentially a lot of what you have, your net worth is tied into this property. So I get it. I understand that property values dropping is not what you're wanting, but you got to think of this group over here. How are they going to get into this market if we continue to have high demand and low supply? Now, you in the middle, you might be sitting there going, you know what? I think I might have made a mistake. I bought at the peak and now it's dropped. What do I do? You know what? Like any downturn in stocks, in real estate, whatever it is, you can ride it out. But you still have to look at who is the party that is going to increase supply, but also decrease that demand. Same thing. Look at who that is and make sure you vote for the person and the group that sits in that category for you. Now, the third ones, you probably are sitting there and you have this feeling of the system is rigged. I don't blame you. I look at my girls who could be purchasing homes in the next 10 to 15 years. And I'm a little bit nervous because in Calgary, we've seen the prices jump like crazy. Not as crazy as other cities, but we've seen it go up a lot. And if that trend continues, and all of a sudden the $700,000 detached home turns into a $1 million detached home over the next 5 to 10 years, depending on the government that we have, that puts them in a really hard position. At the end of the day, all I'm trying to show you is that each party has their plan, and each of these three individuals, you fit into one of these three. Think about another person in another category. Don't think of random people, think of someone in your family. How is your grandkid going to be able to afford a home in the future? Now, you might be in a place where you could gift them that money, you could give them a down payment, which is fantastic. They might need it. But at the end of the day, as soon as we can increase the supply in a rate and a way that works, and we're able to lower or ease the demand, that's the only way we're going to see prices start to level off and we start find some balance in our country. Because right now, there's a lot of unbalance in our real estate market.